Hello there. I'm Dean Joe-Santos Bisquera, the incumbent Dean of the College of Law of the University of Manila, and its incumbent Vice President for Legal Affairs. I am a Bachelor of Laws in Business Administration graduate, certified public accountant, summa cum laude of the University of the East, a Master of Business Administration degree magna cum laude from the University of the Philippines, and also a Bachelor of Laws degree holder from the University of the East, graduating cum laude and class valedictorian. I have been in the corporate world for quite some time, reaching the highest levels to include Executive Vice President of Fuji Xerox and Finance Manager of Motorola. I've been nominated twice as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court and at the same time taught MBA in Financial Management at Dalhousie University and the University of the Philippines. I have been following the congressional hearings on the franchise application of ABS-CBN. I have watched almost all of the heated discussions, especially those led by Congressman Marcoleta. And I feel sentimental because I used to be a very young high school student visiting the Chronicle Broadcasting Network in Intramuros, watching Student Canteen and Darigold Jamboree, where I recall Ms. Laila Benitez, Congressman Eddie Larde, and Pepe Pimentel. And when I became the Dean of the College of Law, I used to be a guest in some of the programs, TV programs at ABS-CBN, notably with Alvin El Chico and the rest of the group, including Tina Monson. I am not in any manner connected with any group in favor or against ABS-CBN. And so I would just like to make this my sharing on the legal, business, and the political aspect of the hearing and the application of ABS-CBN for a renewal of its franchise. In my observation, there were four issues that were brought up during the congressional hearing, and I would like to address these issues if only to provide some perspective into what really are the substantial components of these issues. These issues would include the citizenship of Gabby Lopez by way of testing whether or not ABS-CBN comply with the requirements of a 100% Filipino ownership in mass media. The second one is the issue of the Philippine Depositary Receipts and whether or not the issuance of the PDRs would open the window for foreigners to participate in mass media in violation of the Philippine Constitution that mass media should be in the hands of 100% Filipinos. Third, I would like to touch on the component of the labor issue confronting ABS-CBN. And fourth, the concept of tax avoidance versus tax evasion and what is the responsibility of ABS-CBN on this one. And at the end, I will summarize these points in terms of whether or not each of them would have contributed to a logical and fair grant or disallowance of the application for franchise by ABS-CBN. To immediately provide the perspective, let me go immediately to the four issues of citizenship required for a mass media outfit like ABS-CBN. Straight here and now, let me say that Gabby Lopez, based on the Philippine Constitution and following international law on conflict of laws, Gabby Lopez is a natural-born Filipino citizen. Second, the issuance of the Philippine Deposit Receipts open the window for foreigners to come in. Having said that, let me go into a deeper evaluation that ABS-CBN did not have to go into PDRs as a means of financing. However, I would also like to help CBN highlight that they failed to call attention that the PDRs could not be used to leverage the foreigners into influencing the management and control of ABS-CBN. On the labor issue, I would like to call attention that ABS-CBN is invoking the provision in the labor code on project employees. This is a hotly contested issue. However, present labor law contains the provision allowing project employment. And ABS-CBN explored that particular component that brought about some of the issues now pending before the NLRC and the labor courts or the labor arbiters. And finally, let me conclude that based on what I have heard about the tax issues involving ABS-CBN, I did not find any opportunity for ABS-CBN to be accused of tax evasion. But ABS-CBN, with the help of its tax consultants, made extreme use of tax avoidance, which is legal and legitimate in our country. In summary, the four issues brought against ABS-CBN could not have contributed to the rejection of the application of ABS-CBN's franchise. However, let me say here and now that the exercise of a franchise in mass media is a privilege that a sovereign state can grant. And it is an exercise of discretion, and this discretion is exercised by the congressman that undertook this particular hearing. And so perhaps in the final analysis, I have called this series of slides the ABS-CBN Waterloo, a strategic oversight on the part of ABS-CBN. To start the ball rolling, let me now go to the citizenship issue of Mr. Gabby Lopez. Let me take a position that Gabby Lopez is a natural-born citizen and therefore his citizenship should not be an issue insofar as ABS-CBN being 100% Filipino in mass media. I take the position that Lopez is a natural-born Filipino citizen. First, the Philippine Constitution's jus sanguinis, or citizenship by blood, recognizes Gabby Lopez as a natural-born Filipino citizen because his father and his mother are citizens of the Philippines when he was born, and that is contained in the provision of the Philippine Constitution on citizenship. In international law, the Philippine domestic law, that is the Philippine Constitution, determines a person's nationality. So that if we looked at Gabby Lopez, we simply say, here is Gabby Lopez, and let us now take a look at our Constitution on whether or not Gabby Lopez is a natural-born Filipino citizen. Our Constitution says that when a person is born and the father or mother is a Filipino citizen, this particular baby born is a natural-born Filipino citizen without doing anything at all. However, let me now state that borrowing American law, Lopez is also an American citizen. U.S. law respects and follows the principle of jus soli, which makes Gabby Lopez an American citizen because he was actually born in the United States. Again, in international law, U.S. domestic law determines a person's nationality. Under U.S. law, Gabby Lopez is an American citizen. Technically, therefore, if we now elevate the issue on international law, Gabby Lopez is a Filipino citizen under Philippine law and an American citizen under American law. And so the international law, therefore, gave him a label called he has dual citizenship. He's Filipino under Philippine law and he is American under American law. Now, how does this impact on the citizenship requirement of the Constitution that mass media like ABS-CBN should be 100% Filipino? The question that therefore revolves only around Gabby Lopez being part of ABS-CBN. If ABS-CBN requires a 100% Filipino citizenship and Gabby Lopez is a stockholder of ABS-CBN, the only question is Gabby Lopez a Filipino citizen or a non-Filipino citizen to make sure that the constitutional provision about 100% Filipino is satisfied. I submit that Gabby Lopez is 100% Filipino citizen under Philippine law and the requirement of Philippine law that ABS-CBN, a mass media organization, should be Filipino is met by reason of Gabby Lopez being a Filipino citizen. It is irrelevant that he is also an American citizen because there is nothing in the Constitution that refers to American citizenship insofar as defining what is required to become a member of a mass media organization like ABS-CBN. Let me therefore say that Philippine law decides Lopez citizenship based on its domestic law. The domestic law is not competent nor possesses any legal basis to determine that Lopez is an American citizen. Our Philippine domestic law excludes American law in its competence and jurisdiction. Therefore, when we discuss about the requirements of Philippine law cannot make any judgment insofar as the American citizenship of Gabby Lopez is concerned. Philippine domestic law has no competence, neither does it possess any legal capacity to interpret American law. Philippine law can only deal with Philippine law. Let us now go to the second point. The second point raises the issue on whether the Philippine Deposit Receipts, where the stockholders of ABS-CBN borrowed money and executed in effect a pledge using their shares of stock. And the exercise of borrowing money was evidenced by a document invented by their lawyers, and they called it the Philippine Depositary Receipts. Obviously, the PDRs are not original. There are also these types of instruments in the American setting. But let me submit that the PDRs may deplete Filipino equity in ABS-CBN because the holders of the PDRs have an inchoate right over the shares of stocks pledged by the Lopez Group covering the ABS-CBN shares of stocks. Let us go back a little to a review, if you may, of what is capital stock and what is borrowed stock under the corporation law. Corporate capital structure consists of debt funds or borrowed capital plus owners' equity funds in capital stock. In effect, our financial management and our corporation law tells us that there are two sources of long-term capital of a corporation. A group of individuals comprising about at least 5 persons may decide to contribute their personal funds to establish and incorporate a corporation, a Philippine corporation, which they register with the Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission. The contribution that these particular shareholders give to their company is called the owner's capital or owner's equity in the form of shares of stocks to which they are issued as evidence of their ownership. When the corporation is already functioning, that particular corporation has the authority and the power to borrow money. And when that particular corporation borrows money, then it gets money normally from banks, and we call that borrowed capital or debt funds. So you have the two types of capital that the organization is looking at. The initial capitalization is called equity funds, owners' equity funds, evidenced by shares of stocks issued to them, and borrowed capital. So you have equity capital and borrowed capital. By way of prudent financial management practice and adopted in the loan restrictions in traditional promissory notes, when a particular borrower, debtor, goes to the bank and signs a loan agreement, normally that loan agreement requires that there cannot be any additional loans without the consent and approval of the creditor bank. The real objective of the lending bank is to ensure that the corporation maintains a debt-to-equity ratio of 60-40. That means for every 10 pesos of total capital funds, 4 pesos of that comes from the owners, stockholders, and 6 pesos come from the financing creditors. In the case of ABS-CBN, its debt-to-equity ratio was averaging in the year 2018 to 2019 to something like 49% for debt and 51% for equity. In effect, for every 100 pesos, 51 peso is coming from the capital funds of ABS-CBN and 49 pesos are contributed by their creditors. Now, obviously, the equity funds now can be perceived as two layers. The first is what is called the paid in or contributed capital, and the second one is called the earned capital, the accumulation of profits that the organization has earned, which normally is called the retained earnings of the organization. So the initial contribution of the owners of ABS-CBN plus the accumulation of their earnings after dividends have been paid out represents 51% of the total long-term capital of ABS-CBN. It is way within the 40% limit of equity. In other words, it has a bigger equity than the minimum. So that on the borrowing side, ABS-CBN borrowed 49%, amounting to 34.2 billion of the total capitalization. And therefore, it is way within the maximum limit of 60%. In effect, we can now say that if 60% is the maximum debt exposure of ABS-CBN and it is only exposed to 49% now, it can afford to borrow 11% more to reach that particular 60% debt limit. And once it reaches that 60% debt limit from its present 49% debt limit, normally ABS-CBN with its bankers will agree to prudently stop the borrowing until the equity funds of ABS-CBN start building up again through profitable operations build up in retained earnings. It is therefore very clear that if ABS-CBN should decide to increase its borrowings, its debt capital from 49% to 60%, ABS-CBN could have readily borrowed 20 billion without resorting to the PDRs. In effect, it can increase its present level of borrowing from 34.2 billion to 54.6 billion before it reaches the maximum level of 60%. Now, this particular component has never been discussed by either the congressman headed by Marcoleta during the sessions. Neither did ABS-CBN present this financial picture that would have strengthened their PDR position. Let me go a little further in saying that the danger of the PDRs in the hands of the foreigners is that the foreigners may influence the management decision-making process of ABS-CBN. Now, that is true if the PDRs are substantial and there can be a threat for them to convert from the PDRs to the shares of stocks of ABS-CBN. Here, there is no danger because ABS-CBN had 36.4 billion peso in its equity, mainly retained earnings. And so that therefore, if there is a need for them to buy back the PDRs, helping the Lopez Group as stockholders with this, they can immediately issue additional shares in order to offset the threat of a possible conversion by the holders of the PDRs. So the holders of the PDRs have no means of pressuring ABS-CBN to allow them to participate in management decision making because they cannot live up to the threat of converting the shares because ABS-CBN can readily afford to buy back those PDRs with a very high 36.4 billion in equity. ABS-CBN financials would have allowed them not to resort to the PDRs and still raise borrowed funds of 8.5 billion to 20 billion had their corporate and financial strategists anticipated that the PDRs could be used as a political leverage to weaken ABS-CBN's position concerning foreign involvement in mass media. In effect, the bottom line is ABS-CBN strategists should have anticipated that the PDRs may be used as a political leverage issue during the application for franchise. And so, even before they filed their application for franchise, they should have removed the PDRs from the capital picture of ABS-CBN by simply increasing their borrowings because they still have a leverage of 11% more to bring up their borrowings to 54.6 billion. So the only window on the issue of foreign meddling in ABS-CBN was as a mass media outfit was that the PDRs can open the window for foreign intervention. ABS-CBN policymakers did not fully understand the PDRs and its strategic implication insofar as their application for franchise is concerned. If they understood what is the harm of the PDRs in the area of foreign intervention, it would have been very easy for them to go to the traditional bankers and borrow to reach the 60% debt to equity ratio and buy off all of those PDRs. Those who designed the PDRs needed more financial perspective rather than their focus on perfecting the legal design of the PDRs. To be candid about it, those who designed the PDRs were heavily good on the legal side but did not have sufficient knowledge about the implication of this financial instrument in terms of the strategy for ABS-CBN. And so, to the extent that ABS-CBN debt to equity ratio is very safe at 49.51, that should have been brought up during the congressional hearing to highlight that the threat of the foreigners using their PDRs to meddle with the management of ABS-CBN is not at all operationally possible. This is a very sad case of the failure of the ABS-CBN team to bring out. And perhaps, had I had the opportunity to help them that I did not, I would have called their attention on this aspect. Fortunately, I am a lawyer, but what is needed here is not the legal component likewise. The heavier component is the mastery of financial management and corporate funds management. Now, on the labor sector, in the issue of ABS-CBN on project employees, the project many, according to the arguments, there were 11,000 workers directly or indirectly working with ABS-CBN. I am not sure on the final numbers, but lower numbers of 2,000 to 4,000 were being mentioned as the real regular employees of ABS-CBN. And the bigger balance would be project employees, either contractuals under ABS-CBN or being used by labor-only contracting contractors for ABS-CBN. And so you have now, for example, employees working for quite some time with ABS-CBN, and yet they are not regular employees. Unfortunately, we need to borrow a discipline from another field, which is personnel management or human resource management. As you know, human resource management can take two opposing perspectives. One school of thought is to consider the labor cost component in the operation side as a burden, pahirap. Hence, extracting output from workers at the lowest possible cost becomes an underlying philosophy by some personnel or human resource managers. Corporate philosophy on people come first may be costly in the financial ledger, but the long-term impact of very high morale and running the extra mile among highly motivated employees cannot be readily measured until overwhelming crisis challenges the organization. I remember in the refinery, Bataan Refining, when I was with ESO and later on Petron, when we were talking about the efficiency of our workers at Bataan Refining, because I noticed how efficient they were when the signal for a fire drill was sounded. In fact, there was even really a fire that cropped up. The entire refinery behaved like an aircraft carrier where every employee knew where to go, except the two of us, Mr. Cady Esteban, my friend, and myself, because we were just visiting from Makati on our project systems project. We were the only ones who did not know where to go, and we were beside the employee relations manager who told us to just stay put in the canteen. I did praise the HR manager for such a show of efficiency. And he had a very naughty smile. He said, Joe, our efficiency and teamwork is beyond question. The only difference, and this is the joke among the refineries, is that whether or not such teamwork, such camaraderie, such efficiency will boil down to the outcome that we want. For example, he said, we're so efficient in the area of fire because if the refinery gets on fire, everybody can be dead. However, the little joke is when you have an efficient labor force in the refinery that is geared to fight this fire, and they get all of their hoses and open the valves. When this is a group of motivated employees, what will come out is water to put off the fire. That is a very efficient and a highly motivated labor force. But what happens now if you have an efficient group but demotivated? They will still do the same, and position all of their hoses on the fire. But when they looked at each other and wink at each other, when they open the valve, they do not open the valve for water. They open the valve so that petroleum products will go out and further aggravating the fire. This is what I was referring to here as the long-term impact of morale and running the extra mile when you have a group of highly motivated employees. By my personal experience, the presence of categorized project employees who keep on longing to be called regular employees only to receive at least, some of the additional benefits of registered employees make a difference between the highly inspired component of the labor force and those that are a little demoralized. The stubbornness of a soldier to die for his cause, for his group, for his country, say it, has its own parallelism in human resource management. Unfortunately, when human resource is guided purely by costings and legal technicalities, then project employment becomes a very good means of cutting down on headcount. Labor-only contracting and project employment evolved as complementary mechanisms when labor is managed as a low-cost operations input. Hence, project employment, notably in the construction and security agency industries, have dominated a long line of pending cases on illegal dismissal before the labor courts and arbiters. A worker loses his job coterminous with the end of the project in the case of project employees. And it is therefore difficult to imagine how morale can be high among those project employees. And ABS-CBN had more project employees than regular employees. ABS-CBN human resource, and legal experts on labor must have found the opportunity to invoke project employment because TV and radio programs do have their gestation periods. They do come and go depending upon the whim of the listening and viewing public. Hence, workers could have readily passed the criteria to be project workers moving from one program to another as contract employees. The human resource philosophy has its cost advantages but long-term strategic handicaps. ABS-CBN could have tolerated what is convenient from a cost viewpoint rather than be driven precisely by the real kapamilya philosophy for all its employees and workers, including the more than 6,000 project categorized employees. Tax avoidance, a legitimate option. Going back to the concept of governance, this is a beautiful Latin saying that runs salus populi est suprema lex. Salus populi est suprema lex, which simply means the people's welfare is the supreme law. That is the mandate of every sovereign state in serving its people. The power to demand funds from the people they serve is the inherent sovereign power of taxation. The state designs the mechanism by which every member of society must contribute to the common fund for common service and benefit. The state therefore designs its tax system, aware that more taxes to the government deprives its citizenry of the disposable incomes they can spend for themselves. In effect, the essence of taxation and economics is that there is a certain amount of funds and government can either take the initiative of picking up a portion and giving the remainder to its citizenry to spend, or perhaps minimizing the tax so that the citizenry could have more funds to use. And the fundamentals of economics is if you allow the consumer to have more funds, then it generates economic activity. However, since the government can only collect taxes consistent with the sovereign will of the people collectively, no taxes can be collected unless duly approved by the people through their legislature. When the taxpayer does not pay his tax through cheating, then there is prosecution for tax evasion. But when the taxpayer is able to find some weaknesses in the design of the tax model, his tax savings is legal and legitimate as tax avoidance until and unless the legislature plugs in the loopholes in the legislation for taxation. ABS-CBN exhausted its choices on tax avoidance so that there appears to be no sound basis to belabor them on the exercise of their legitimate tax options. Otherwise, all of the lower amounts that they paid on tax compromises should have been the issue with the former BIR commissioner who should have faced cases of graft and corruption before the ombudsman. In the absence of any prosecution against the BIR commissioner then, obviously, ABS-CBN could not be guilty of any sin against tax avoidance. And so, let me reiterate that the ABS-CBN Waterloo is a strategic oversight. And if I were a friend of ABS-CBN, let me go back to that and saying, if I were a friend of ABS-CBN, I would have advised them to play their political cards rightly. Playing these political cards lately would have addressed the issue of Lopez being a Filipino citizen. That should be a non-issue because international law and Philippine law clearly establishes that Gabby Lopez is a natural-born Filipino citizen and does not affect the requirement that ABS-CBN should be 100% Filipino-owned. On the matter of tax avoidance, the matter is clear that ABS-CBN has not been prosecuted for violating any tax law. And the compromises that it arrived with the Bureau of Internal Revenue should have, first of all, exposed the commissioner into into prosecution before the Ombudsman. The absence of any of these cases should not be used in any manner to condemn ABS-CBN in the area of tax avoidance. Our tax system provided them with some loopholes, and the citizenry is not wrong in exploring tax savings arising from the state's failure to plug in those loopholes when the tax law was enacted. Third, the presence of project employees is a matter of discretion because the law on project employees continues to be in our labor books. And it is therefore in the discretion of ABS-CBN to either be an adherent to project employment as a legal technicality in order to deprive 6,000 of its 11,000 workers of regularization, or ABS-CBN could have lived up to its commitment of being kapamilya so that any employee could undoubtedly be a regular employee even when project employment can be invoked. This is something that is within the discretion of ABS-CBN management, and if there are groups that are harping against them during these hearings, these are the project employees that they failed to regularize. Hindi ho siguro sila kasali dun sa pamilya. Sila po'y nasa labas. Unfortunately, they said 11,000 yung dapat nasa pamilya. Only 4,000 appears to be tunay na kapamilya. Chances are the 6,000 are illegitimate or anak sa labas. Finally, the PDRs could really open up the window for foreign intervention. However, ABS-CBN was so weak in terms of its financial firepower to say that even if they admit that there are PDRs in the market, ABS-CBN financials can readily afford that they borrow capital funds. So they raise borrowed capital so that they can readily wipe out the PDRs if that is the only concern. Second, the equity position of ABS-CBN is strongly in favor of a big retained earnings that can readily buy back the PDRs. And so that therefore, the threat of foreign intervention could not have happened. It could be only a theoretical argument, emotional argument, rather than a reality. ABS-CBN did not come in strong using facts in financial management to defend themselves. And so again, the ABS-CBN is a Waterloo arising from a strategic oversight. This particular strategic oversight may be a function of the failure of ABS-CBN management to see the bigger picture and to argue strongly against whatever is in their favor. With this, I tried to catch up and delay some of my priority projects, if only to put this at YouTube. And my way of saying, too bad, I feel sad for you, ABS-CBN employees who stand to lose their jobs on August 31, 2020. I have not seen them for quite a while, but I used to be invited as a guest in some of the ABS-CBN TV programs, notably by Alvin El Chico, by Tina Monson Palma, and the others that I could not immediately recall the names. And I will miss those occasions where you gave me my extra ego-boosting opportunity to be a guest in your programs. I will definitely miss those opportunities. And I do hope that this humble contribution I have will allow you to reassemble yourselves and hopefully reposition yourselves in the political arena, because it doesn't mean that if your franchise was turned down today, tomorrow you cannot come back to the legislature and our people and probably strengthen further your hold by using, in all humility, these slides that I have to boost your chances of getting your renewal of your franchise. Take note, the four issues that were used against you were too weak for you to face a rejection on the basis of merits. And probably in the next round, presenting strongly your merits now and allowing yourselves to create that kind of strength to argue the strong points of ABS-CBN will allow you again to be with us, to allow us to view your news, to allow us to follow through your beautiful drama programs, including Provinciano, and the rest of the programs we enjoyed. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you again over radio and television. This is Dean Attorney Joe-Santos Bisquera, the incumbent Dean of the College of Law and the Vice President for Legal Affairs, University of Manila. Thank you very much for patronizing and watching this slide. Thank you.